if you want to continue to follow our adventure, click subscribe. So you don't miss anything, click the bell notification. Hello, House on the Road, subscribers and followers. Okay, imagine yourself, it's in the 1800s, you live in Minnesota. You have a farm, you got a couple of horses, you got a buggy, you got a family, and you hear about gold in California. You think, I'm going to take my couple of horses, my buggy, put a top over it, and I'm going to go to California to find gold. I'm going to get rich. Okay, think about how difficult that would have been. You're leaving something that you absolutely know that you have. You have a food source, you have water, you have heat, you have shelter, possibly even some firearms for self-defense, and now you're going to try to pack it all into a little bitty horse and carriage. I mean, 2 horses. I don't know what 2 horses can drag across country. Oh, that's another point, is you got to be able to have enough of these resources to take care of the horses. And so you pack it all up and you start heading out. Of course, you're going to run out of these supplies. I don't know how long it takes in a horse and buggy to go from Minnesota to, say, California. But let's say it takes a couple months. And then you got to go over all these hills or mountains and rivers. And it would be, I just cannot fathom leaving all that safety. And so, okay, you travel and then you find, oh, you run out of water. Well, of course, I guess back then they took the water right out of the stream, they boiled it and they drank it, I guess. But you're constantly worried about the next thing. It would have been overwhelming. And here's why I say this. When we get to a location, we always are stressed out about resources. Where's the food? Where's the water? Once we identify those things, then we start to get comfortable. And it's almost to a point where you start to dread leaving. And what you end up doing, and at least what we do, is we end up just staying in an area as long as possible, trying to surround around the resources that we have learned. We did it in Virginia. We stayed in Virginia in the George Washington National Forest, kind of throughout several campgrounds, because we knew where the water and where the stores were, how far they were. It was relaxing not having to go search for these things. And then we went down to Florida and we stayed in the Apalachicola National Forest, and sure enough, we did the same thing. We really wanted to go further south, but we just was worried about the resources. There were several things going on there. Go to Florida, you're not even guaranteed being able to find a campsite because, you know, all the snowbirds are going south. In the Apalachicola National Forest, you were even worried about leaving your campsite because hunters would come and take your campsite. Apalachicola National Forest, you're allowed to stay there from, I believe, October to February. Don't quote me on that, but something like that. Mid-October to mid-February, because of hunting season. So you can stay there the whole time. Or you can go to any other campground, Apalachicola National Forest. But the problem is if you decide that you're going to go and then you want to come back, pretty much guaranteed you're not going to have your campsite. Well, we didn't leave. We stayed there because we knew we had a campsite. We knew we had water. We knew we had internet. We knew we had food sources close by. We stayed there. I wonder sometimes if it was to our fault that we stayed there. As people started to recognize who we were, our camper, you know, they knew our routine. You know, they knew that we left. They knew we came back. There was 3 campgrounds there that have water close by. So we just, after the hunting season, kind of started moving around. Well, then we came back to the one that we stayed at through the hunting season, and that's when our camper got burned down. So sometimes we wonder if we actually stayed so long in that area that people got used to our routines and realized, okay, well, we can steal their food and then burn down their camper. And then when we left Florida, we went up through Mississippi and we stayed at a campground that we've been at before because we knew it had water. We knew where the town was to go get food. So you almost instinctively start going back to places you know because it has everything you need and you know where it's at, and you don't have to waste money and resources and time trying to find all these. Well, when we went up to South Dakota, now we're in an unknown resource area, and it was very stressful for the first couple of weeks, trying to find the water, the stores. But what we ended up doing was the same thing. We went over to the grasslands. We stayed there for 2 weeks. We went over to the Black Hills. We stayed there at one campground for 2 weeks and then moved to another campground for 2 weeks. And then we came back to the grasslands. We were able to stay in that general vicinity for 8 weeks because we learned where everything was. And it did, and it really did. It circled a resource. It circled Rapid City. We're back here in Missouri, and we're doing the same thing. And I think we're doing it more out of necessity this time because we're trying to, visit with Bex and we want to stay close to her. But instead of going out and finding new campgrounds, what we're doing is we come to visit Beck for a week and then we go back to camping for 2 weeks. Well, there's about 5 or 6 different campgrounds that we can stay at. All in this, 20-mile radius of each other. We visit Carolyn's daughter for a week, then we go up to one of these campgrounds. It's got water. We know exactly where the water is. We know where the cheap food is. Now, this is also very dependent on money. The more money you have, the easier I think this is going to be for you. Remember, we try to stay at a budget around $850. So I think we really stretch the limits of our ability to obtain resources with that kind of budget. I think the higher the budget, the better off you're going to be, where you don't have to worry about finding and maintaining resources is probably the best way to put it. If you decide to fill up your tanks, for example, and you go out boondocking for a couple of weeks, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to go over to the RV park and fill up, dump my tanks, and I can stay there for a week, well then see, that makes things a lot easier because you can find those anywhere in the country. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you're like us and you want to stay below that $1,000 budget, I think the best thing to do is you find an area with resources. And then the next time, because ours is a long-term adventure, we're going to spread our adventure out over years. What we're going to end up doing is we'll go back to Florida, for example. And then we'll go to Apalachicola, but maybe we'll only stay there for a few weeks this time. And then we'll venture further south and try to stretch what we're doing. And then come back if necessary. Because now we know the area, we can better able to find camping spots even if the one we had was taken. And we'll do the same thing in South Dakota. We'll go back up to South Dakota and we're going to stretch ourselves further north, probably to North Dakota, but knowing that we can always come back down to this safe resource spot if things don't work out. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Click like if you like the video, and happy travels.